Hey guys, tonight we dive into a story that will gently rattle your molars. You lie still, tucked beneath soft blankets, as the desert night swells around you. Sand whispers across the distant dunes. Somewhere in the dark, the Nile glides silently, moonlight dancing on its surface like sleepy silver fish. And in the heart of a temple, surrounded by the perfume of incense and the faint hum of chanting priests, a strange little powder is being mixed. The first toothpaste. Not minty, not smooth, and definitely not something you'd squeeze out of a plastic tube. But it's happening, and you probably wouldn't survive this one with all your teeth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge quietly through the sticky heat of the ancient Egyptian sun, past tall columns painted in bright lapis and ochre. Even the sacred ibis are napping in the shade. But not you. You're heading into the mortuary temple of a long-dead nobleman. It smells like myrrh, embalming oils, and a hint of chalky dust. What you later realize is crushed pumice, the ancient Egyptians' favorite dental abrasive. You're here for a lesson in pre-modern dental rituals. And oddly enough, those rituals begin with the dead. In Egypt, the mouth wasn't just for chewing or chatting about pyramid taxes, it was a spiritual gateway. When someone died, their lips and teeth had to be opened with a ceremonial tool, usually made of carved metal or stone. It looked a bit like a dental instrument and symbolized the reopening of breath and speech in the afterlife. Imagine going to your funeral and someone brushing your teeth mid-eulogy. Awkward, yes, but apparently essential for immortality. And it wasn't just symbolic. Bodies were sometimes prepped with actual mixtures applied to the teeth. Archaeologists have found residues near the skulls of mummies, chalk, ash, even fragments of oyster shell, which likely doubled as both polish and plague for fragile ancient gums. You tiptoe farther inside the temple. The floor is gritty beneath your sandals. A priest leans over a low bench, mixing something with a flat bronze spatula. Smoky, that's the burnt eggshells. Next, he grinds in ox hoof shavings, leftover from another ritual. The scent is something like scorched toast and boiled leather. You're tempted to gag, but this, dear friend, is prestige toothpaste, circa 1500 BCE. Historians still argue whether this formula was used daily or reserved for rituals. Was it part of a normal morning routine, or only dabbed onto the teeth of elite mummies just before burial? The scrolls don't exactly come with dental schedules, but what's certain is that Egyptians placed massive importance on oral cleanliness, not just for health, but for spiritual hygiene. One mainstream historical fact often overlooked: dental disease was rampant in ancient Egypt. No surprise, really. Their bread was full of grit from millstones. Every bite of wheat came with a bonus sprinkling of sand. And no, they didn't have floss. Instead, they used chewed twigs, miswak-style brushes that doubled as mouth fresheners and fiber floss. You trail your fingers over the wall carvings. There's a depiction of Thoth, god of wisdom, with the head of an ibis, handing a tool to a human figure. Scholars think it might be a dental implement, or maybe a feather duster. Interpretations vary wildly, especially after you've inhaled too much temple dust. The priest gestures for you to sniff the paste he's made. You lean in hesitantly. It stings your nose. Bitter, smoky, gritty. Definitely not cinnamon-flavored. But in this world, you'd be grateful for it, because that paste, lumpy and strange, is possibly your only defense against festering gums and breath that could clear a camel's stall. And so, as your eyes grow heavier, and the priest continues mixing his sacred grit, you realize something oddly comforting. Even 4,000 years ago, people were desperate to keep their teeth from falling out. Not because they were vain, not because of dating apps, but because in Egypt, a clean, working mouth meant you were still human in this life and the next. And maybe, just maybe, even your ghost had to pass a breath check before entering paradise. You duck beneath a low lintel and step into a narrow room that buzzes with quiet industry. Welcome to the sacred workshop, the toothpaste kitchen, though no one dares call it that aloud. The air is warm, thick with the scent of resin and something faintly charred. Soft shadows flicker across mud brick walls as oil lamps sputter and hiss. Here, behind temple walls and priestly veils, the everyday alchemy of cleanliness unfolds, without a mint leaf in sight. A scribe is seated cross-legged in the corner, meticulously copying a recipe onto a strip of papyrus. His reed pen scratches faintly as he records the ingredients. Powdered burnt bread crusts, oxen hooves roasted until brittle, myrrh resin crushed into a fragrant dust, and a pinch of rock salt for good measure. All measured not in grams or cups, but in vague terms like a pinch, a smear, or as the gods decree. Ancient Egyptian dental recipes were as much ritual as they were hygiene. You shuffle past clay jars labeled in hieroglyphics, stylized pictures of birds, snakes, stars, and reeds, each containing ingredients you're not entirely sure are legal in modern kitchens. One is stuffed with dried mint, not for toothpaste, oddly enough, but for perfume. That's right, no spearmint swirls in this dental paste. Instead, the Egyptians leaned into abrasive, aromatic, and downright bitter components. If it didn't sting your tongue and rattle your molars, it probably wasn't effective. At the center of the room, a priest wearing a leopard skin sash stands over a grinding slab, stone against stone. He's methodically crushing what looks like toast. Blackened, flaky toast. It's not breakfast gone wrong. It's burnt bread crust, carbonized until it crumbles into a powdery ash. This, according to temple tradition, adds a purifying element to the toothpaste, symbolic of transformation. And yes, it scrubs your enamel like sandpaper. Historians still argue whether these formulas were standardized or mostly experimental. Some scrolls suggest regional variations. Up north, more natron salt. Down south, more resin. The recipes weren't fixed. More like sacred suggestions passed down by temple apothecaries with strong arms and bad breath. Next to the priest, a young assistant begins shaving thin slivers from a dried ox hoof, the shavings curling like wood beneath a plane. The hoof, once boiled, dried, and hardened, adds texture and, supposedly, fortitude. In theory, the keratin helps clean teeth. In practice, it probably gave ancient Egyptians the sensation of chewing a particularly stubborn bone. There's a reason toothpaste in 2025 doesn't crunch. You glance over at a shallow basin where myrrh resin is being slowly crushed into a fine dust. The scent is thick, earthy, and medicinal, with a spicy sweet undertone that clings to your nostrils. Myrrh was prized not just for its aroma, but for its anti-inflammatory properties. Modern researchers have even confirmed it contains compounds that can reduce gum inflammation. See? Not every ancient recipe was just a dusty superstition. Still, even with all these noble ingredients, the texture remains, how shall we say, aggressively crunchy. One ancient formula discovered in a papyrus from the Greco-Roman period, around 4th century CE, but in Egypt, includes instructions to mix until a fine powder is formed, add a few drops of water, and rub upon the teeth with the finger. No soft bristled toothbrush, no foamy rinse, just your index finger and grit that could probably refinish a wooden deck. You lean in, watching the final mix take form. The priest adds a splash of Nile water, unfiltered, of course, and stirs the paste into a muddy gray sludge. Then he dips a bundle of frayed papyrus stems, tightly bound, into the goop and offers it to you. Your instinct is to back away, but you take it, smile politely, and press the stem to your teeth. Tastes terrible. Burnt, bitter, salty, and vaguely meaty. It sticks to your tongue like clay and clings to your molars with all the stubbornness of a bad idea. You gag, but quietly. The priest nods approvingly. It stings, he says. Therefore it cleanses. You spit discreetly into a corner bowl, which you sincerely hope wasn't meant for ceremonial use. The gritty residue clings like beach sand, and yet your mouth feels strangely awakened. Not clean exactly, more like it just survived a very small earthquake. And yet, there's beauty in this ritual. These weren't just ingredients tossed together in desperation. They were selected with care, blended in sacred spaces, and often blessed before being used. Oral hygiene wasn't a vanity project. it was a spiritual duty. Clean teeth meant purity of breath, and purity of breath meant worthiness before the gods. Mainstream Egyptologists agree that these pastes weren't for everyone. Daily dental rituals were probably reserved for priests, scribes, and nobility. Farmers and laborers were more likely to chew on twigs or rinse with natron water. Social class affected everything in Egypt, even how much hoof you got in your toothpaste. And then there's the mystery of the animal ingredients. Some scholars believe the use of ox hooves and other animal parts had symbolic meaning: strength, endurance, vitality. Others argue it was more pragmatic, leftover materials being repurposed in creative, if slightly nauseating, ways. There's no definitive answer, just a lot of scholarly side eyes and speculative footnotes. So you sit there, lips slightly numb, watching as another batch is prepared. The apprentice shuffles ingredients like a sleepy bartender. Myrrh, crust, hoof, salt. It's less recipe, more ritual. And you begin to see the rhythm in it. The soft scrape of stone, the trickle of water, the quiet respect for a clean mouth. Strange, isn't it? In a civilization obsessed with death, so much care was given to preserving a smile. You're seated cross-legged now, somewhere quiet and shaded, in the corner of a dusty archive room buried deep within the temple complex. The air smells of aged parchment and dried lotus petals. A fan made of palm fronds creaks overhead, slow and steady, stirring just enough breeze to keep your eyelids at half-mast. Before you, spread across a reed mat, is a fragile roll of papyrus, the kind of thing museum alarms would scream about. Here, in your lap, lies the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts known to humankind. And it's about to whisper to you the curious secrets of ancient oral care. You tug the scroll open gently, the fibers crackling like dry leaves. Line by line, little black birds, eyes and squiggles, hieroglyphs, march across the parchment in perfect rows. These aren't spells or stories. They're prescriptions, remedies, toothpaste recipes and gum disease cures with the kind of poetic vagueness only 3,500-year-old medical advice can offer. One entry reads something like, "To strengthen the teeth, crush green lead with incense and honey. Apply for 4 days." You blink slowly. Green lead, not exactly FDA approved, but enthusiasm counts for something, right? The Ebers Papyrus, copied during the reign of Amenhotep I around 1550 BCE, is a 110-page medley of medical wisdom. Though it spans everything from crocodile bites to baldness remedies, it also contains what could be the world's first written dental chart. Not in the neat boxes and molar diagrams you're used to, but in prose: symptoms, locations in the mouth, and what to apply when the ache won't quit. If your tooth pulses like a frog, one passage advises, try a paste made of crushed onions and beer foam. No guarantees about your breath after. Historians still argue whether these scrolls were truly practical tools or more ceremonial guides for priest healers. Did the average Egyptian ever glimpse this sacred document? Or was it just for the elite, rolled up in golden libraries guarded by sleepy cats? Either way, the scrolls show that Egyptians took mouth trouble seriously. In fact, one modern mainstream fact often surprises people. Dental decay was rampant in ancient Egypt. Not because of candy, but because their bread, basic, hard, and often filled with stone-ground grit, acted like slow-motion sandpaper. Every bite wore down enamel like a river carving stone. By the time you reached 40, your teeth might look like a miniature mountain range. And so, the prescriptions multiplied. To soothe an aching tooth, rub with powdered cucumber seeds. To eliminate the smell of death breath, chew on mint leaves and frankincense. Yes, now mint makes an appearance. Just not in paste form. That would be too easy. One scroll details a mixture so offensive you wonder if it was more of a threat than a cure. Burnt mouse bones, boiled in beer, then strained and applied to the gums. Imagine someone lovingly preparing that for your next cavity. Makes modern floss look downright romantic. You reach for another scroll, less famous than the Ebers, but no less curious. The Hearst Papyrus. Shorter, snappier, a bit more experimental. It includes toothaches and mouthworms, which likely weren't real worms at all, but early guesses at cavities or infection. The idea of tiny creatures gnawing at your teeth wasn't exclusive to Egypt. It shows up later in Babylon, China, and even Europe. Humanity really committed to the blame invisible critters school of medicine. What's striking, though, is the calm tone of it all. The remedies weren't panicked. They were methodical, recorded by people who believed every plant, stone, and animal part had its place. And behind every cure was a worldview, one that saw illness not just as physical discomfort, but as imbalance of the body, the spirit, or even cosmic order. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. In some high-status tombs, archaeologists have discovered tiny ivory tools, delicate, scoop-shaped, and strangely similar to modern dental picks. Some theorize these were used to clean between the teeth. Others think they were cosmetic applicators. Either way, it's a tiny clue that someone, somewhere, was poking around in their molars with precision. The first dental hygienist, perhaps? And let's not forget the divine angle. Certain Egyptian deities were invoked for mouth health. The goddess Circuit, usually called upon for scorpion stings, was also whispered to for relief from biting spirits in the jaw. Horus, the falcon god, was prayed to for strength of teeth, because of course the god with a beak would know dental resilience. You lean back, papyrus now gently curled shut, and glance at the walls. Painted scenes depict offering rituals. Loaves of bread, cones of incense, and smiling figures with impossibly white teeth. You begin to suspect those smiles were more aspirational than realistic. Still, the intention was clear. A clean, pain-free mouth was part of being in harmony with the universe. Even today, dental students marvel at how advanced some of these ideas were. Recognizing infection, distinguishing gum problems from tooth issues, using antiseptic herbs like frankincense and myrrh. Sure, they also believed in magic spells and mouth demons, but really, who doesn't whisper a curse when a molar flares up at 2 a.m.? And so you sit, wrapped in the warm stillness of this ancient medical library, imagining generations of sleepy priests and weary peasants rubbing odd pastes onto their aching teeth, all hoping to keep the pain and the judgment of the gods at bay. You're outside now, under the chilled hush of the desert night. The stars above you scatter like crushed pearl dust, smeared across a sky so wide it feels like you could tip backward into it. A thin crescent moon hangs crookedly, casting silvery shadows over the thatched roofs of a sleepy village nestled along the Nile's bend. Somewhere a jackal howls lazily, probably just annoyed at another goat chewing his hiding spot. You follow the faint sound of sloshing water and soft grunts until you arrive at a reed-walled hut, low and crooked, with a narrow slit of amber light spilling from beneath the door. Inside, an oil lamp flickers, casting wobbly shadows across woven mats, pottery jars, and a single, hunched figure crouched over something or someone. Welcome to the late-night dental clinic of an overworked, underrested Egyptian healer. His name is lost to history. Let's just call him Hapu. He's not a priest or a scribe, but he's respected. People come from miles around to see him when chewing turns into wincing and eating bread feels like chewing rocks because, let's be honest, it sort of is. Tonight, his patient is an elderly farmer with cheeks like river-worn stone. He moans softly as Hapu leans in, holding a bronze hook that's seen too many mouths and not enough boiling water. The tool gleams dully in the lamplight, curved and blunt at the end. There's no anesthetic unless you count prayer and shouting. You crouch beside Hapu, trying not to breathe too loudly. In a nearby bowl, some beer foam sloshes around, freshly skimmed from an earlier batch of warm, slightly sour Egyptian brew. It's not for drinking, it's for soothing, or numbing, or disinfecting, or maybe just to keep the flies off. The Eber's papyrus mentioned this trick, remember? Turns out beer was the Swiss army knife of ancient Egypt. Hydration, nutrition, medicine, and now mouthwash. The farmer opens his mouth wide, or as wide as decades of erosion will allow. His gums are inflamed, teeth worn nearly to stumps. Hapu murmurs a chant, not out of superstition, but rhythm. Steady, calming, something to hold the old man's focus while the work begins. With a practiced flick of the wrist, he dips the bronze hook into a jar of crushed carob pods mixed with sycamore sap. Sticky, gritty, and smells like burnt raisins. This paste acts as both filler and salve, packed into cavities with a tiny sliver of date palm bark. Not ideal, But when your other option is, do nothing and hope it stops hurting, it's practically luxury care. Historians still argue whether Hapu was just improvising or following formal training passed down through apprenticeships. Some temples had dedicated medical schools, especially in cities like Heliopolis and Memphis. But out here in the rural reaches, experience often outranked education. If you fixed enough teeth without killing anyone, congratulations, you were now the village dentist. The tools were rudimentary, sure. Bronze hooks, sharpened reeds, and sometimes, brace yourself, tiny stone drills spun between the palms. Yes, the ancient Egyptians may have pioneered the art of the dental filling. One poor soul's remains were found with linen fibers stuffed into a cavity, probably soaked in medicinal herbs and wedged in tight to keep out infection. Cheaper than a crown, but with way more screaming. You shift uncomfortably on the mat as Hapu moves to his next step, massaging the gums with an ointment of crushed garlic and goose fat. The garlic burns, the fat soothes, and together they probably made the patient smell like a very committed barbecue. Still, there's logic to the madness. Garlic contains natural antiseptic properties, and fat helped the mixture stick to inflamed tissue. Then comes the weirdest bit. From a shelf overhead, Hapu pulls down a small, dried lizard. Its eyes long gone, its tail curled in a permanent, "Please don't use me for anything" posture. He crumbles part of it into the ointment. Why? No one knows. Maybe it was symbolic, or maybe someone once swore it worked and the tradition stuck. The line between science and ritual was blurry at best. Outside, the wind shifts. You hear the gentle rustle of papyrus reeds by the riverbank. Inside, Hapu's fingers are steady now, his hands no longer trembling with exhaustion. He leans in and inspects his work. No tooth extraction tonight, just a painful cleaning, a paste pack, and a whispered prayer to Tarit, the hippo-headed goddess of childbirth and protection. Because if anyone can calm a grown man whimpering through dental work, it's probably a protective hippo goddess. A curious aside, some tomb paintings even depict dental scenes, subtly tucked between funerary offerings and family banquets. In one, a servant holds a tool near a noble's open mouth. Maybe it was just symbolic, or maybe even the rich had their Hapu on call. One thing is clear. Good teeth were as prized as fine linen and perfumed cones. The night deepens. Hapu finally straightens, joints popping like ancient temple doors. He pours a splash of beer foam over the tool to rinse it, rubs his face with the edge of his tunic, and looks utterly spent. His patient breathes through his mouth now, slack-jawed and grateful. And you sit there, warm from the oil lamp, belly full of odd herbs and soft facts. You've just witnessed a tooth being saved with nothing more than beer scum, bronze, and bravery under starlight. You're indoors again, this time in a very different kind of space. The ceiling here is high and carved with painted lotus flowers. The air smells of frankincense, warm stones, and something faintly sweet, like overripe dates soaked in almond oil. Silk curtains stir softly in the breeze, and somewhere outside, musicians are plucking lazy notes on a harp as two doves quarrel over a fig. You are in the private quarters of a queen. Not just any queen, the queen. Cleopatra VII, last pharaoh of Egypt, ruler of the Nile and lover of both politics and public image. And while most history books have her wrapped up in Roman drama and tragic endings, tonight, you're here for something far less theatrical and far more minty. Yes, Cleopatra had a dental routine, probably a very meticulous one. Imagine, you're the ruler of a kingdom where appearances, literal and symbolic, carry divine weight. Your statues are carved in stone, your profile printed on coinage. Your smile must sparkle like sun on the Nile. And yet, no Colgate, no floss, and certainly no dentist's office offering sedation options. So, how did Cleopatra keep her teeth from falling out while seducing emperors? You glance toward a low alabaster basin, where a servant is mashing something with a golden pestle. The paste inside looks grayish-pink, and its smell hits you like a curious slap. Part floral, part sulfur, part... Wait, is that reptile? Let's talk ingredients. Because Cleopatra's toothpaste wasn't minty fresh. It was luxurious, strange, and surprisingly effective. At the base of it all, powdered pumice stone for polishing. This finely ground volcanic ash acted like modern baking soda, scrubbing away stains from dates, honeyed wine, and roasted goose legs. Then came the add-ins: dried rose petals for scent, crushed pearls for status, and, according to a few surviving herbal scrolls and an extremely suspicious Greek observer, just a dab of crocodile dung. Yep, you're brushing with poop now. Why? Well, historians still argue whether crocodile dung was used as a whitening agent, a breath freshener, or simply a magical symbol of fertility and power. In any case, it was dried, powdered, and mixed with vinegar or natron paste to form something between a cosmetic and a prayer. Cleopatra wasn't alone in this ritual. Upper-class Egyptian women were known for their hygiene obsessions. They used beeswax for hair removal, kohl for eye protection and aesthetics, and were among the earliest wearers of perfume and body oils. So why not extend that obsessive curation to the mouth? One papyrus suggests a recipe including crushed mint leaves, iris root, and a hint of cinnamon bark, possibly imported from trade routes stretching as far as the Red Sea. Trade, after all, was Cleopatra's domain. Her court boasted ingredients from all over the ancient world: myrrh from Punt, saffron from Crete, even peppercorns from the Malabar coast. If it smelled nice, numbed pain, or sparkled, she probably tried it. Tonight, her handmaidens grind these rare elements together, humming softly as they shape the mixture into little pellets. These are stored in palm-sized boxes made of ivory or onyx, sealed with wax, and labeled with ink symbols. One box bears the hieroglyph for mouth, followed by joy. Others are simpler: a smiling lioness or a lotus in bloom. You kneel beside Cleopatra as she inspects her teeth in a polished obsidian mirror. They're not the porcelain white veneers we expect from toothpaste ads, but they're intact, even, and healthy looking. Her lips curve. She seems pleased. And here's the twist: Cleopatra was likely aware of the science behind these rituals. Raised with Greek and Egyptian education, she spoke multiple languages and read deeply. She understood the medicinal properties of herbs and minerals. This wasn't just superstition, it was self-care backed by observation and a hefty treasury. In fact, Cleopatra kept her own book of beauty recipes, Cosmeti, lost to time but referenced by Roman writers with both admiration and mild panic. Recipes from that book inspired Roman innovations in both perfume and oral care. So the next time someone says ancient people were unhygienic, remind them the last pharaoh may have been publishing skincare routines before TikTok ever existed. Of course, not all experiments were winners. One recipe involved crushed mouse bones mixed with honey and rubbed on the gums to stop toothaches. Another mentioned steeping donkey milk with fennel and applying it like a rinse. Whether these worked is, well, let's just say your modern toothpaste is looking better and better. But Cleopatra's oral rituals weren't just personal. They were political. Every smile during court appearances, every careful word spoken with Julius Caesar or Mark Antony, carried diplomatic weight. Clean breath wasn't just hygienic, it was power. A pharaoh's mouth was seen as a divine tool. Her words created law. Her breath, mythically, was the wind of Ma'at, balance, truth, harmony. You watch as she finally dips a finger into the crocodile paste, dabs it onto a fine linen cloth, and wipes each tooth with small, deliberate circles. Then she sips from a clay cup filled with anise water to rinse. The scent is sweet and spicy, oddly comforting. A servant approaches, announcing a visitor. She stands, tall and regal, and gives you a look, a silent command that says, yes, even in a world run by men and gods, one should never skip the teeth. And with that, Cleopatra leaves the room, her footsteps soft against the tiles, her smile devastating. The room around you darkens again. Soft shadows stretch long and thin like cats across a sunlit wall. The perfumes of Cleopatra's court fade into the hush of deep time. You feel yourself slowly float upward, weightless now, like a flake of papyrus caught on the desert wind, carried forward not just by years but by centuries. And just like that, you land. The world looks different now, colder, grayer. The Nile has become the Seine or the Thames, and pyramids are replaced with candlelit cathedrals. You're in medieval Europe and dentistry has Well, let's just say it's taken a few steps backward. Tooth care in this era mostly involves praying your molars don't rot out of your skull before age 30. If they do, someone will happily yank them with pliers. An herbal rinse might consist of rosemary boiled in wine, but no one's brushing twice a day, not even once a week. But even here, in this unlikely place, the spark of ancient Egyptian knowledge hasn't completely died. Forgotten scrolls from Alexandria's lost library find their way into monastery collections, quietly passed from scholar to scholar. One monk jots down a peculiar paste recipe involving mint and burnt shells. Another experiments with chewing sticks from the arak tree, just like the ancient Egyptians did. Over time, twigs and cloth scraps return to mouths. They're not exactly efficient, but better than nothing. Now you glide forward again, Renaissance Florence this time. Streets filled with chatter, linen clothes drying in the breeze, and the distant scent of roasted chestnuts. You pass a well-dressed apothecary preparing little packets of powdered charcoal and salt, to be rubbed gently on the teeth with a damp cloth. Nearby, Leonardo da Vinci doodles a sketch of human jaw structure, labeling the incisors and molars with tiny, looping letters. Historians still argue whether these early Renaissance powders did more harm than good. Some formulas contained ground oyster shells or even brick dust, which over time wore enamel down rather than preserving it. But the intent was there, a growing awareness that mouths mattered not just for appearance but for overall health. And then, another leap. Industrial England, a nation lit by gas lamps and steam power. In your dreamlike haze, you drift into a Victorian bathroom, glorious in its strange contradictions. Brass faucets, lavender soap, and a stiff pig bristle toothbrush that feels more like a broom than a beauty tool. The paste, made from chalk, glycerin, and a dash of cinnamon oil, sold in ceramic pots with elegant, overly enthusiastic fonts like Dr. Gleason's Miracle Dental Cream. You swirl forward yet again, this time 20th century America. Post-war optimism is everywhere. TV sets humming in cozy living rooms, chrome kitchens, pastel tiles. In a tidy suburban bathroom, a child stands on tiptoe, smearing blue gel onto a soft nylon brush. The paste smells like mint and bubblegum. It's a far cry from oxen hooves and burnt bread crusts. Toothpaste is now sold in collapsible tubes, lined up in pharmacy aisles with promises of whitening, sensitivity relief, and tartar control. You chuckle softly. Tartar would have sounded like a mysterious desert demon to an ancient Egyptian priest. But here, it's a daily concern. Even children know the drill. Up, down, swish, spit, done. Somewhere in the haze of this modern moment, you float back to that first workshop, to the sleepy priest grinding burnt eggshells by oil lamp. You remember the gritty scent of powdered oxen hooves, the solemn concentration, the reverence for the body as a sacred vessel. And it clicks. The journey from tomb dust to toothbrush was never just about hygiene. It was about control, ritual, even hope. Across time, people scraped and swished and dabbed whatever they could in their mouths, not just to look better, but to feel like they were resisting the inevitable. And yet, for all our innovations, our electric toothbrushes and laser whitening kits, there's something oddly soothing about those earliest experiments. They remind us that even 5,000 years ago, people just like you stood before a bowl of strange-smelling paste and thought, well, it's worth a try. Now, as the long arc of history slows its spiral, your surroundings begin to melt into mist. You're back in your own bathroom now, lights dimmed, toothbrush quietly resting beside the sink. You glance at the shiny tube of paste, mint-flavored, fluoride-rich, clinically approved, and smile. Somewhere, Cleopatra nods in quiet approval. You've made it all the way from the banks of the Nile to the edge of your own dreams. The gritty eggshell pastes, the crocodile dung powders, the midnight healers with bronze hooks. They've all faded now, like smoke curling upward into a velvet sky. Let yourself drift further, deeper now. The world is quiet, and the clamor of kings, queens, priests, and peasants has softened into the hush of time. Let your breath slow, matching the gentle pulse of ancient river tides. The journey was strange, yes, but beautifully human. Each odd paste and every whispered prescription held the same longing. To care for ourselves, to feel clean, worthy, perhaps even lovable. Even as empires crumbled and science advanced, that small daily ritual, brushing, rinsing, tending, remained a thread across centuries. So let it go now, the images, the scrolls, the crocodiles, and crushed pearls. Let them fall gently away, like grains of sand slipping through fingers. Your pillow cradles you like a soft dune. Your thoughts stretch out, sleepy and slow, like the Nile easing toward the sea. There's no need to move, no need to think. Just this stillness, this comfort. Tomorrow, the modern world will return sinks, mirrors, maybe a dentist's reminder call you'll pretend to ignore. But tonight, you're in good company, resting with the ghosts of history's gentlest eccentrics, lulled by the soft rhythm of stories and time. Sweet dreams.